Hey everyone, and welcome to the 5 Bytes podcast. I'm your host, Rory Monahan. Now, let's dive into some of the highlights from this week's news in enterprise IT. Tech4Gamers reported recently that Windows 12 may be released as early as this year, with suggestions that it will be a modular OS, meaning that users will have the option to add or remove features, making the OS more customizable and flexible. Essentially, meaning that you could select to have a build that's for lighter weight systems, one that is prioritized for gaming builds, etc. It appears PC World were the first to report this, and they suggest that the OS is currently codenamed Hudson Valley Next. And they also confirmed that they believe it's set for release this year. And they say it's going to be right around the time when Windows 10 has its support end for the extended ESU. Now, if you listen to the podcast regularly, of course, you'll know in the enterprise, there's the extended security update program that lasts for 3 years, where essentially the cost will start to increase year on year the longer you require it. But also, if you listen to the podcast, you'll be aware that, well, depending on region, some enterprises have an option for a more accessible ESU, at least for 12 months. But on the consumer side in general, consumers have this option to get 12 months by just utilizing certain Microsoft features either for free or some paid Microsoft features will get you the extended security updates for 12 months. So that would make sense that if they release for when the extended security update expires after the first 12 months, that it would be released later this year. It seems PC World also suggests that visually, this may be a major leap for the OS as well, with new visual layouts expected to include transparent glass elements and a floating taskbar, which does align with some other design choices by other operating system creators, such as Apple, for example, who have gone with those kind of transparent glass rounded icons for some of their menus. So just like how ribbon menus were all the rage back 15 or 20 years ago, and it seemed like all applications in the OS followed suit. It seems like now the Windows operating system may follow with this trend as well. As one would expect, Microsoft Copilot may also be more aggressively injecting into the ecosystem and could be a core part of Windows 12 rather than a supplementary feature. And as this is the case, it is being suggested that this time a dedicated MPU could be required. So if you thought that the customizable option might mean that you could run Windows 12 on some hardware that's not compatible for Windows 11, at least based on this report, that may not be the case. Although I could maybe speculate myself, because really this PC World report does seem somewhat speculatory. What if there's a customizable OS version that doesn't require the MPU for Windows 12 and maybe doesn't require some of the like TPM and other requirements that Windows 11 currently requires? That could be interesting because it could be a way for customers to move to Windows 12 and not completely abandon Windows and not have to do a hardware refresh. Not saying that's the case. I think it would actually be probably better for Microsoft's own interests to stick to the hardware requirements and have some uniformity and be able to approach the newer Windows operating systems with that uniformity in mind when it comes to security and other aspects of managing the OS into the future. Now, I will say that while the PC World report was picked up by many outlets and expanded on, or just even kind of re-reported, including by major outlets too, there are others who are pouring cold water on this report entirely. I will say, now I'm not a tech Nostradamus, which I feel like I've said quite a bit over the last 12 to 18 months in this podcast. But if you listen to the podcast regularly, I was kind of speculating myself that it would make sense for a Windows 12 to be on the horizon, given that AI is becoming so mainstream now. It seems kind of hodgepodge the way that they're currently trying to factor in AI onto Windows 11 and kind of bolt it onto Windows 11. And then also the rollout of the Copilot Plus PCs is a little bit jarring the way that that has rolled out as well. So I think it would make sense to have a Windows 12 where right from the beginning, it has been built with AI as a first class citizen. Also, it would help if they have some kind of real head turning features utilizing AI for Windows 12 to incentivize people to make the move. And while that is the case, it's also just as possible that it doesn't come out this year. And I don't think it would necessarily be because Microsoft doesn't hit its development goals. I think a bigger concern or factor is going to be the fact that there's such a drain on the hardware resources that if they do try to maybe up the requirements and do require that MPU and people have to buy new hardware to run Windows 12, that it might appear at least that the adoption of Windows 12 could be even slower than Windows 11 was, which would not be a great look, which may lend more credence to, hey, what if they could customize the OS, turn off some of these features, and get their current hardware that won't work with Windows 11 to work with Windows 12? Now, all this is just fun speculation, but hey, that's kind of the fun of having a podcast. Sometimes I can go a little off the reserve and chatter away on these kind of topics, but it'll be interesting to see what happens nonetheless. Apple has launched its low cost MacBook Neo, powered by the A18 Pro chip and priced as much as its iPad Air. The Neo is powered by the A18 Pro chip, as I just said, which has a 6-core CPU with 2 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores, a 5-core GPU, a 16-core neural engine, and 60 gig per second memory bandwidth. Considering the price band, it could be seen as Apple's competition to the Surface Laptop Go. Apple said that it's up to 50% faster for everyday tasks like web browsing and up to 3 times faster when running on device AI workloads like applying advanced effects to photos compared to best selling PCs with the latest shipping Intel Core 5 Ultra. It's fitted with a 13-inch liquid retina display with a 2408 by 1506 resolution, coupled with 500 nits of brightness and an anti-reflective coating to improve the viewing experience. It reportedly also features a 16-hour battery life, dual side-firing speakers with spatial audio and Dolby Atmos, complemented by a 1080p FaceTime HD camera and dual microphones. Among other features, the MacBook Neo comes with 8 gigs of unified memory, a Type-C USB 3 port, a Type-C USB 2 port, a 3.5mm headphone jack, Wi-Fi 6E, Bluetooth 6, DisplayPort 1.4, and supports one external display at 4K 60 hertz. Now, the most surprising aspect of this, other than the price, which I think is actually awesome, very smart move by Apple, is the fact that it's got a 3.5mm headphone jack. I would have thought that Apple would continue to go the way they have on some of their other MacBooks and try to force people to use like Bluetooth wireless headphones or whatever. So including that, I think, is an interesting wrinkle. I don't know if that says something about how they view the kind of people that would be buying these laptops. If they think, oh, well, they're more likely to still use traditional headphones. I don't know if that's their thinking or not, but I found it interesting nonetheless. And while Windows seems to be moving more towards ARM potentially, which should bring it more into competition with the MacBooks in terms of battery life, I think this brings Apple kind of down a few steps to potentially compete with Microsoft and other PCs in this range, which is smart on their part. Kind of another tangent here. This is the way my mind is working currently. Uh, with the whole advent of AI and potentially that Windows 12 we were talking about, it would be interesting to see which core processors become dominant on the PC side of things, and if it will continue that ARM will be kind of like the next wave as it's been speculated as, or if it won't now, and maybe we'll continue to suffer with weaker battery life on the PC side. I can't imagine running intensive AI workloads will help with the battery life, quite frankly. According to a report by bleepingcomputer.com, IT administrators can now enable a more secure processing mode that prevents batch files from being modified within the latest Windows 11's insider builds. According to a recent report by bleepingcomputer.com, IT administrators utilizing the latest Windows 11 insider builds can now enable a more secure processing mode that prevents batch files from being modified while they run by adding the lock batch files in use registry value under HKLM software Microsoft Command Processor. Policy authors can also enable this by using the lock batch files when in use application manifest control. This change is reportedly designed to boost performance and security in enterprise environments where admins rely heavily on scripted workflows. The Windows Insider team said, quote, "We are giving administrators and application control for business policy authors additional controls over the processing of batch files and command scripts. Starting with this release, administrators may enable a more secure mode for processing batch files that ensures they do not change during execution." End quote. They also said that this enhances the performance and security of batch file processing when code integrity is enabled, as signature validation will only be required to be performed a single time instead of per statement executed in the batch file. So the latter is pretty nice. Also, the former is pretty nice because obviously cyber gangs could inject and change what scripts are doing during execution. So I think this is a positive change all around. In rather telling news of where we are as an industry, bleepingcomputer.com has reported that Google will be shifting Chrome updates from 4-week to a 2-week release cycle for the rollout of new features, bug fixes, and performance improvements, which is obviously twice as frequent as currently. Now, this is for bug fixes, performance improvements, and new features, by the way. They do currently roll out security fixes at least once a week. So I say at least because it's supposed to be once a week, but sometimes something goes wrong in the mix. So they have to release a fix pretty quickly after one of those once a week updates. Reportedly, this new model will apply to both beta and stable releases across desktop, Android, and iOS. Google said in a press release, quote, "While releases will be more frequent, their smaller scope minimizes disruption and simplifies post-release debugging. And thanks to recent process enhancements, we are confident this shift will maintain our high standards for stability." End quote. Now, if you're to maybe compare to, say, Windows updates, you'd probably be like, yeah, to be fair, Google Chrome updates are pretty straightforward and they don't cause like catastrophic problems or really noticeable problems all that often. However, I will say you may be lulled into a somewhat false sense of security. You know, if you do a Google search, ironically, on Google Chrome update breaks, you will find some issues caused by these updates. But of course, you will. When updates are this frequent, it's inevitable that something breaks. It's just it's going to be maybe less catastrophic than a Windows update breaking something across the entire Windows operating system and Microsoft ecosystem than within the browser. I know in the context of Notepad++, there was a lot of, I don't know, is it mean to say kind of ambulance chasers um, kind of following up with, oh, this is why you need to manage the updating of applications because look at the risk of a potential supply chain attack or intercepting on top of these updaters to bring in nasty stuff into your network. And yeah, I mean, I agree with that. It is definitely true. But then you see something like Google Chrome where the updates are just this frequent, like, you know, security updates at least once a week. And now these more significant updates every 2 weeks. How can an IT team stay on top of this? It's going to become an ever mounting challenge because while this is Google Chrome, and yes, browsers are kind of low hanging fruit for cyber attacks, this is also going to start to happen more frequently with other commonly used applications. So the problem is only going to get bigger. In an update to a story covered last week, the University of Mississippi Medical Center resumed normal operations 9 days after a ransomware attack blocked access to electronic health records and took down many of its IT systems. While no ransomware group claimed responsibility, while no ransomware group claimed responsibility for the incident, as they're likely still negotiating with the hospital system and want to pressure it into paying a ransom, hospital officials revealed during a press conference last Thursday afternoon that they were in contact with the attackers. They said, quote, "The attackers have communicated to us and we are working with the authorities and specialists on next steps. We do not know how long this situation may last," end quote. As reported last week, the hospital system is now investigating the incident with assistance from the FBI and the US CISA. Security researchers have disclosed a high severity vulnerability dubbed clawjacked in the recently acquired OpenAI agent product OpenClaw that allows a malicious website to silently brute force access to a locally running instance and take control over it. According to Oasis Security, the vulnerability is caused by the OpenClaw gateway service binding to a local host by default and exposing a WebSocket interface. Because browser cross-origin policies do not block WebSocket connections to localhost, a malicious website visited by an OpenClaw user can use JavaScript to silently open a connection to the local gateway and attempt authentication without triggering any warnings. While OpenClaw includes rate limiting to prevent brute force attacks, the loopback address of home 127.00.1 is exempt by default, so local CLI sessions are not mistakenly locked out. The researchers found that they could brute force the OpenClaw management password to hundreds of attempts per second without failed attempts being throttled or logged. And once the correct password is guessed, the attacker could silently register as a trusted device as the gateway automatically approves device pairings from local hosts without requiring user confirmation. With an authenticated session and admin permissions, the attacker can then interact directly with the AI platform, dumping credentials, listing connected nodes, stealing credentials, and reading application logs. Oasis said this could allow Oasis Security says this could allow an attacker to instruct the agent to search messaging histories for sensitive information, exfiltrate files from connected devices, or execute arbitrary shell commands on paired nodes, effectively resulting in full workstation compromise, triggered all from a browser. The security company discovered the issue and reported it to OpenClaw, with a fix being released in version 2026.2.26 on February 26th. So if you are an OpenClaw user, then yeah, you should be safe for now. And actually, you know what? I'll save it for a script trick and tip, but I saw some pretty cool OpenClaw usage this week that I want to talk about. The IT consultancy and services provider company Accenture has agreed to buy speed test and down detector owner Ookla from Ziff Davis for $1.2 billion in cash, which to me is mind-boggling. Accenture says they plan to use data gathered from Ookla services for applications such as helping hyperscalers and cloud providers ensure the resilience of AI infrastructure and edge data centers, which deliver most of the inference workload, improving fraud prevention in banks, conducting smart home analytics in utilities, and retail traffic optimization. In a statement, Accenture Chief Strategy and Services Officer Manish Sharma said, quote, "Speed test and route metrics define the experience. Down detector identifies incidents faster, and Akua drives digital workplace transformation through superior Wi-Fi. In an era of omni-channel and agentic access, low latency, zero friction connectivity is a competitive necessity, and these tools give enterprises the power to build the high-performance environments they need." In a different statement from Accenture CEO and Chair Julie Sweet, she said, quote, "By acquiring Ookla, we will help our clients across business and government scale AI safely and build the trusted data foundations they need to deliver the reliable, seamless connectivity that creates value," end quote. Should Accenture's acquisition close, they will similarly use data from Speedtest and Down Detector to inform clients and individual users, and they'll be subject to new privacy policies and any other changes Accenture potentially makes. However, an Accenture spokesperson told Ars Technica that Accenture plans to operate the Ookla business as it operates today. So hopefully that means on the consumer side, if we're doing our ISP speed tests, that will continue into the future, which I'm guessing it will because it probably helps inform their data set when people use those free tools anyway. So I just found it pretty interesting that uh, it went for that much money, $1.2 billion. When I believe when Ziff Davis bought it, it was in the millions. So huge increase in value. And it's interesting that they valued it that much to acquire it. It's also interesting that it's Accenture buying it too. Yeah, it would be interesting to see how it plays out, I guess. In an interesting story, babycomputer.com has reported that a Florida woman, a nice alternative to the usual Florida man, was sentenced to 22 months in prison for running a massive years-long scheme to traffic thousands of stolen Microsoft Certificate of Authority labels. So if you're not familiar with that label, you might be young, because if you remember to the physical CDs or DVD releases of the Windows operating systems or other Microsoft products, it would have had that shiny label that was the Microsoft Certificate of Authority. Well, that's essentially what she was kind of conning people with, I guess. It's reported that 52-year-old Heidi Richards, who operated an e-commerce business called Trinity Software Distribution, was also ordered to pay a $50,000 fine, which seems minimal when you hear the rest of this. As prosecutors explained, the labels that carry no independent commercial value and may not legally be sold apart from the licensed software and hardware they're designed to accompany can be used to activate Microsoft software without a legitimate license, leading to an illicit market for standalone COA labels. In all, it's reported that along with her accomplices, she bought tens of thousands of genuine Windows 10 and Microsoft Office COA labels from a Texas-based company between July 2018 and January 2023, paying millions of dollars at prices far below retail value. And rather than sell the labels with the software they were intended to accompany, she directed employees to extract the product key codes by hand and transcribe them into Excel spreadsheets, and then sold the extracted Microsoft license keys in bulk to customers worldwide, wiring an amount of $5,148,181.50 to a supplier between 2018 and 2023. So that's why I think a $50,000 fine and 22 months in prison doesn't seem like that bad of a deal considering the amount that was sold. Still, I wouldn't want to be going to prison for 22 months and have to pay $50,000, but I was surprised by that. NewWin.net has reported that OpenAI announced GPT 5.3 Instant, which is the successor of their most used model, GPT 5.2 Instant, this week. Well, actually, really last week by the time this episode comes out. OpenAI claimed that this new model will deliver more accurate answers with richer and better contextualized results from the web. Instead of targeting AI benchmarks, OpenAI focused on improving tone, relevance, and conversational flow. By the time you listen to this episode, chances are you'll already have access to GPT 5.3, as it should be released to all customers. However, paid users can still access GPT 5.2 Instant for a further 3 months in the model picker under the legacy mode section. And also, Microsoft has announced that GPT 5.3 Instant model is now available to the Microsoft 365 Copilot and Copilot Studio users. I find this interesting, and this isn't the first time this has happened, by the way, but what's interesting to me is that when Copilot was kind of new, and like everyone was aware that it was using GPT in the background, it lagged behind the releases compared to the native OpenAI ChatGPT. But in the more recent releases of new GPT models, Copilot has been right there along with ChatGPT. So it seems like Microsoft is determined to not fall behind again, which is smart because why would someone pay for Copilot if they could get the latest models and more features from ChatGPT? On the topic of OpenAI, NeoWin.net has reported that OpenAI announced the official launch of the Codex app for Windows. Now, this app has been available on other operating systems before now, but it is now available for Windows, and you can download it in the Microsoft Store. The app comes with a native agent, sandbox, and support for Windows developer environments in PowerShell. Google has announced Gemini 3.1 Flashlight, its most efficient and fastest model in the Gemini 3 series. This new model is targeted toward high volume developer workloads and is already available in preview for developers via the Gemini API in Google AI Studio and Vertex AI for enterprises. Google says 3.1 Flashlight beats Gemini 2.5 Flash on speed with a 2.5 times faster time to first token. Oh my God, I stumbled over that. And a 45% increase in output speed based on artificial analysis benchmarking. With this improved overall speed, Google is claiming that this model is highly suitable for real time, high frequency experiences. Gemini 3.1 Flashlight is priced at 25 cents per 1 million input tokens and $1.50 per 1 million output tokens, undercutting the larger models for developers and enterprises that need to make a lot of API calls without a large budget. Amazon has confirmed that 3 AWS data centers in the UAE and in Bahrain have been damaged by drone strikes, causing an extensive outage that is still affecting dozens of cloud computing services at the time of this recording. While the company did not provide further details on the incident, the attacks are likely part of Iran's response to the US and Israeli strikes in Iran over the weekend. Amazon said the drone strikes have disrupted AWS Middle East region, ME Central 1, and the AWS Middle East Bahrain region, ME South 1. And at the time of recording this episode, 3 availability zones, MEC1-AZ2 and MEC1-AZ3 in the UAE, remain significantly impaired, while a third, MES-AZ2 in Bahrain, is still affected by a localized power issue. And I saw that the United Kingdom's National Cybersecurity Center alerted British organizations to be on a heightened alert due to increased risk of Iranian cyber attacks amid the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. As the NCSC added, even though most of Iran is currently dealing with the widespread internet blackout imposed by the Iranian regime, state-sponsored hacking groups are likely still able to attack their targets. Finally, in the news for this week, just as Anthropic's Claude topped the iOS app charts, it unfortunately suffered a global outage. The outage appeared to last several hours. And talking about some of the highs and lows for Claude, Anthropic, who make Claude, also reportedly rejected demands to work with the US government due to ethics grounds. And then in short order, OpenAI announced a deal to work with the US government. So it seemed like they tried for Claude. Claude resisted, or Anthropic resisted to do a deal with Claude for the US government. So they went with OpenAI instead. It is a bit mad, the amount of stories that seem to tie back to politics in technology these days, and it only seems to increase week on week. I'd rather not be delving into the politics ends of things, but that is definitely helping shape the future technology. You know, it's obvious that despite the hyperbole and the fact that maybe AI is not everything and is not the be all and end all in terms of the tech and what it can do today, the future potential is quite dazzling, and it would be foolish to disregard it completely. And it's definitely going to shape the way the world uses technology into the future, and that's creating an awful lot of geopolitical struggle just even around technology. Um, Never mind the actual wars as well. But now this episode's scripts, tricks, and tips. Okay, just one to cover this week. I had more, but this episode's run long with my rambling. I saw a really great video from Chris Matthew, who you may remember from OctoBlue and Magic Leap and post-acquisition of the latter. Chris is now working with Intel, and he posted a great video of him using his open source solution together with OpenClaw and some of his little robotics toys to essentially use natural language to command robots to do actions, such as, hey, how far away is the person in this room? Because the robot has a high intelligence camera, it's able to measure the kind of depth perception and how far away an object is. So it would return, oh, this person's like 2 meters away. And then he could use natural language to say, okay, well, move 1 meter closer to that object. And it would actually do that. So pretty cool stuff, and kind of real world application of leveraging AI and natural language together with robotics as well. So check that out if you want to see some cool technology. And I'll leave it at that. And I apologize for the audio this week. I'm sick. I'm heavily medicated, like I've been saying for weeks. But I feel like I stumbled a lot over my words. And definitely my voice is not as strong as it usually is. So thank you for persevering, and catch you next week.